Yeah, hey, Bene. Good morning, my relatives. Or actually, not good morning, good afternoon. This is Mark Charles, and I am here drinking my second cup of coffee on March 5th, 2024. And I just want to say hello to everybody. I want to thank those who are up joining me for this coffee and those who are going to be watching it later. And I want to start just as I always do by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from the land of the Piscataway. I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. So I want to just start a little bit light today. There's a few things I want to discuss around the election in 2024, but I want to go a little bit light. And most of you see this cup I hold up every morning. It's my Navajo Nation Reservation Bluebird Flower Cup. I use it to drink my coffee in. And for those of you who don't know about Bluebird Flower, I just want to introduce you. So Bluebird Flower, and this is a bag of bluebird flower. This is a 5 pound bag. This is a small bag, the smallest bag that they sell. This is flour that is made on the or milled on the Navajo Nation, or right near the Navajo Nation, Cortez, Colorado. And it is the standard flour to use if you want to make Navajo fry bread. So when you make Navajo fry bread, you really need two things about Navajo fry bread. And every nation, every native nation makes fry bread a little bit differently. Navajo fry bread is bigger, right? Most pieces of fry bread will fit on a plate. A good piece of Navajo fry bread will extend beyond the plate. So Navajo fry bread is bigger, and Navajo fry bread is almost always, always, always made with bluebird flour. Bluebird flour is actually a little bit different than most other flours in that it is ground a little bit finer. And so, if you ever notice when you buy just unbleached flour or flour from a regular, just a grocery store, often it will clump a little bit. Bluebird flour almost never clumps. It's ground very fine and it doesn't clump. And it comes in these cloth bags. So, this is actually not a paper bag, it's a cloth bag. And if you ever want to make a Navajo friend or relative happy who doesn't live on the Navajo Nation and you're going to go visit them, you can always bring them a bag of bluebird flour and they will be very, very excited. Every time I go home to see my parents back in New Mexico, I always leave room in my suitcase because I always come back with at least 1 or 2 bags of bluebird flour. I usually buy these little 5 pound bags if I have room. Sometimes I'll buy a 10 pound bag. This last trip I took with my daughter when we went skiing, we had 2 suitcases. So we actually brought back about 25 pounds of flour. We brought back 3 5 pound bags and one 10 pound bag. And if you're going to travel with bluebird flour, you just have to be aware whenever you travel and you have it in your carry-on luggage, you will always have the extended TSA check. They will always, because it's a large bag of white powder, they will always check it. And so even if you warn them ahead of time, hey, I have bluebird flour in my suitcase, and if you're flying out of Albuquerque or Phoenix, either the TSAs will know what you're talking about, but they tell me, no, we always have to check any bag of powder that goes in or out here. So you'll always have to spend a few more minutes in the TSA line when you travel with your bluebird flour, but it is way worth it. So I love having my flour here. I make tortillas probably so actually I make tortillas several times a week. I make dough a few times a week and I keep it in the fridge, and then for a dinner or for a lunch, I'll usually make a tortilla. My daughter and I have breakfast burritos at least once a week, if not twice a week. I always make my tortillas with bluebird flour. So yeah, it's a staple. So again, you want to make a Navajo relative happy who doesn't live on the Navajo Nation, bring them a bag of bluebird flour, and we will always, always be thrilled. Anyway, just a little bit of a in a little bit of information, inside information on my cup here. And so I'm not sponsored by Bluebird Flour. I'm not getting any endorsement money from Bluebird Flour. I'm just letting you know it's something that is very much a part of the Navajo. I don't know if it's a culture, but it's part of what we do on the reservation. And you can buy these bags of flour as small as 5 pounds and as large as 50 pounds. And so when you live there, often you'll go to TNR or one of the grocery stores and buy your 50 pound bag of bluebird flour. Anyway, We won't talk about the health crisis around that comes from eating bluebird flower, but yes, that's what we do. Thank you, my relatives, for joining me. I hope you're all having a good morning so far, early afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the 2024 primary. If you saw my social media over the weekend, you'll know that I shared a few things regarding the GOP primary going on this last weekend, especially the one here in DC. And I posted on my social media that I'm not a member of the GOP, right? I'm not part of that party, but I'm actually very proud of the Republicans here in the District of Columbia because they gave Nikki Haley her first primary victory over Donald Trump. Now, I'm not a massive supporter of the policies of Nikki Haley, right? If she even were to win the election, I would not vote for her. But in the primary, I'm absolutely rooting for her because I absolutely believe that Donald Trump needs to be challenged in this primary. He cannot just let himself be the presumptive nominee. He must be challenged, just like I absolutely believe Joe Biden must be challenged in the primary. And so anyone who is willing to step up within the Republican or the Democratic parties and challenge those two white landowning males from the upper echelons of the 1%, I will absolutely root for them. And so I applaud Nikki Haley for staying in the race. She said over and over she will stay in the race at least until Super Tuesday, which is today. And she has been running and she has been working hard and really trying to give an alternative to Donald Trump in the Republican Party. And I'm proud of the Republicans here in the District of Columbia who gave her her first primary victory. Now, I want to just quote one thing from this article. The article I shared was from Politico. And one of the things it said is Trump's prospects in the district in DC, GOP primary, were never high. He was trounced in the contest here in 2016, coming in third behind Marco Rubio and John Kasich. Still, his campaign made a play for DC Republicans this year, warning DC lobbyists that they will be blacklisted from any future Trump White House access if they didn't show up to vote in the weekend primary. Right? This is just par for the course for Donald Trump, which is using blackmail and using threats and using access to him in the White House to get people to support or vote for him or get behind him. But anyway, now again, this victory in the district is not a very big deal nationwide. We do not have, we're a very small state, or not even a state, we're a very small district. I think you got the number of delegates that they won were 19 or 18, something like that. So in the large scope of things, it's not going to do much for Nikki Haley's delegate count, but it does give her a victory. And the district is also 95% Democrat. And so there's very few Republicans who live here in the district and can vote here. And if you read that article, it's interesting because the Republicans who live here define themselves as kind of a different breed of Republicans, right? They know they are in the district. They know it's highly Democratic. They have to go out of their way to be noticed here. And because they live in the district, they have access or at least relationship with a lot of people within the district. And so, or without a lot of politicians here in the district. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that they kind of set them apart. But anyway, you can read that article. I applaud Nikki Haley. Thank you for staying in the race. And yeah, it's good to see that she is willing to challenge Donald Trump. I'm not going to say much about the Super Tuesday voting going on today. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be able to clinch, if not even get close to clinching, or even clinch the nomination today. He is expected to do very well in many of the states that are voting today. But I'm not going to be commenting on that as much right now. I may talk about it later this week. I want to also talk about the Supreme Court case that was decided yesterday, where if you follow the Supreme Court case, right, Colorado and a few other states were trying to bar Donald Trump from being on the ballot for president in their states because of his role in the insurrection that happened on January 6th. And Colorado's Supreme Court actually did bar him from being on their ballot. Donald Trump, of course, sued, and the Supreme Court heard the case, and they issued their opinion yesterday. And I want to just share this story with you. Let me get this here. And the story that I'm sharing is in the AP News. And it's titled, "The Supreme Court Restores Trump to Ballot, Rejecting States' Attempts to Ban Him Over the Capitol Attack." And so basically, the Supreme Court justices yesterday unanimously voted, and they did not state who wrote the opinion. It was an anonymous opinion, but they unanimously agreed that states are not allowed on a state-by-state basis to ban candidates or to withhold candidates from the state ballots for federal elections. And so that was the unanimous part of that decision. There was some disagreement between both the liberals and the conservative judges, as well as even within the conservative judges, about what the majority ended up ruling, where the majority basically ended up saying that the Congress is the only one who can decide who can be on or be taken off the ballot. And they went as far as to say that Congress needs to pass legislation to actually keep them off the ballot. They need to do it through legislation. And there was a lot of disagreement both within the conservatives as well as within the liberal judges about that, which the majority wrote that, but there was more dissent about how far or what the Congress had to do. And there was disagreement about whether the Supreme Court should have defined what Congress had to do. And the Supreme Court reserved the right to interject itself back into it after the case and basically kind of check on whatever Congress does do at the end. And this ruling and kind of the very narrow scope that the Supreme Court took, they made almost no references to January 6th. They talked specifically about who gets to decide who's to be on the ballot. And they said Congress gets to make that decision, not the states. And the biggest concern about this is, first of all, this is a huge victory for Trump. It puts him back on the ballot in Colorado, as well as it bars other states from taking him off the ballot, which several states were in the process of trying to do that. But one of the fears is that the concern is that if Donald Trump wins the election in 2024 and the Democrats capture both the House and the Senate, so they have a supermajority, or they have majority in both the House and the Senate, so they control Congress, then, according to what the Supreme Court said yesterday, they could then ban Trump from becoming president by rejecting him because of his role in the January 6th insurrection. And so, of course, this is creating opportunity for so much more chaos coming up in the next few months and in the next year. And so I encourage you to read this article because it lays out a lot of really good points about what the disagreement that the justices had, what that disagreement is, and what that means. They actually have one quote here. I want to read it to you. Rick Hasson, who is a law professor at the University of California in LA, UCLA, wrote that it is frustratingly unclear what the bounds might be on Congress. He went on to say, we may well have a nasty, nasty post-election period in which Congress tries to disqualify Trump, but the Supreme Court says Congress exceeded its powers. And so, yeah, so basically the Supreme Court said Congress gets to decide, but then the Supreme Court also said, but then we have the right to change or revoke or disqualify what Congress said. We're going to have the final say in this, but we're not going to define what that is right now. And so it does give Trump a victory, but it also creates a space for a bit more of crisis, or at least chaos, in the next year, as we have the election and then we see what happens, who wins the election, what Congress does, and who wins Congress, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I encourage you to read that article. There's another article I want to share with you that just goes into depth about kind of what all is at stake here. And this is, again, from AP News. And it's takeaways from Trump's Supreme Court win. He stays on the ballot, but his legal peril is just starting. And this kind of even goes more in depth into some of the challenges that we're going to face as a nation in the next year because of how unspecific and very limited the ruling was that came out today. Now, one of the phrases you're going to hear people talking about is this is going to create a constitutional crisis. And does Congress, what is it going to look like if Trump does win and Congress refuses to ratify him? What is that going to mean, and what's going to happen? And if you follow me on social media, you'll notice that yesterday I posted something as I read about the ruling yesterday. And I read a lot of people saying and fearing, oh, we're headed towards a constitutional crisis. And I just went back to something I said throughout my campaign and that I've been saying for a number of years, which is the challenge we're facing, right? What we're facing right now is we have a white landowning male, Donald Trump, who refuses to admit he lost an election. He encourages his supporters to storm the Capitol. He takes an active part in encouraging and initiating an insurrection to put him back in office. He does many, many other things that are highly skeptical and probably even illegal to remain in office. And he is still free. He's not in jail. And he's running for office again 4 years later. Again, if President Obama, our nation's first Black president, did even half or a quarter of the things that Donald Trump is doing today, he would have been thrown in prison so unbelievably flaccid it would have made your head spin. By a unanimous vote from Congress, right? Because one of the most terrifying things this nation ever had was having a Black president do things that are highly illegal to remain in office would have terrified the crap out of this nation, especially if they voted to vote him out of office, right? And it would have been the outcome and the response by Congress, by law enforcement, would have been so absolutely different if a Black person or another person of color was doing the things that Donald Trump is doing to both fight to stay in office when he lost and now to run again, even though he did take part in an insurrection. And so the constitutional crisis we're facing, right? If you read the Constitution, and I've shown this graphic many, many, many times, if you read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, the part of the Constitution that determines who is and who is not a part of the Union, who is and who is not covered by this document. If you read Article 1, Section 2, you must note it never mentions women, right? We have to note that just first off, which is important because if you read the entire Constitution from the preamble through the 27th Amendment, it uses the words he, him, and his, male pronouns, 51 times. 51 times throughout the rest of the Constitution. Who can run for office, who can hold office, even who's protected by this document. There are 51 gender-specific male pronouns used in our Constitution. not a single female pronoun. So we have to note the Constitution absolutely was not written to include women. Second, it specifically excludes natives. And third, it counts Africans and enslaved peoples as 3/5 of a person. So when you take away, back in 1787, women, you take away natives, and you take away black people, who are you left with? Who are you left with? Who is this Constitution written for? You are left with white men. And technically, you had to be a landowning white man to be able to vote. Right? The purpose of our Constitution, the reason it was written, is to protect the interests of white landowning men. That's why we have a Constitution. That's why it's there. It's not written to hold white landowning men accountable. It's written to protect them. And this is why Donald Trump is able to do all of the things that he's doing. I promise you, I guarantee you, he would not be able to do 1/10 of the things that he is doing if he were not white, male, and wealthy. And that, my relatives, is the constitutional crisis that we are facing, which is we have a constitution that was not written to hold white landowning men accountable, and we're now trying to do that, and we find we're not able to do it. It's not able to happen. And that absolutely is our constitutional crisis. It's happening right now. The fact that Donald Trump is free, not in prison, and is running again for president, and Congress and the courts refuse to take a definitive position on eligibility and about what he. This is our constitutional crisis. I promise you, if Barack Obama did this, behaved this way, he would have been in jail probably by January 7th. That's my guess. At the latest, January 8th, he would have been in prison. And that's our crisis. This is why, right? I ran in 2020. I wanted to edit the Constitution. I wanted to remove the racism, the sexism, the white supremacy from our Constitution. But unfortunately, that was not a successful endeavor. So I'm looking for other ways that we can do to begin to change and address these problems. But that absolutely is our crisis, my relatives. And it's becoming very, very apparent every day that we watch what's happening with Donald. Every day that Donald Trump stays free and out of prison is a constitutional is the fruit, the example of our constitutional crisis, which is we have a constitution that was not written to hold white landowning men accountable. That's not the purpose of it. And most of our justices, including our justices of color, are originalists. What does that mean? It means they work to interpret the Constitution in the spirit through which it was originally written. And I promise you, very few, if any, of the founding fathers wrote the Constitution believing that Black people, or Native peoples, or even women would be full-fledged, equal citizens of these United States. That was never their intention. So the fact that even our justices of color are originalists is very disheartening. And that's our crisis. That's our crisis. Anyway, I welcome your feedback on that. Please feel free to put comments into the video. Please feel free to get back and let me know what you think. But I want to end with a bit more of a positive note. It's spring here in DC. The flowers in front of my house are blooming. They're so gorgeous. They're so beautiful. I just want to share some of these pictures with you. I love spring in Washington, D.C. It is my favorite time of season. The flowers, just walking down the street is a gorgeous stroll through beauty. And I am so grateful for the beauty of Washington, D.C. and the flowers that bloom and grow here. Spring is one of my favorite seasons, especially since we moved here to the district from the Navajo Nation. And so look for me sharing more photos of these like these with you over the next few weeks and as we go through spring. Of course, we have the Cherry Blossom Festival coming up in a little while. But yeah, this is one of my favorite times of year here in the district. The mosquitoes aren't here. It's warming up, but it's not hot. It's not humid. You can sit outside in the mornings and the evenings, and it's just beautiful weather. And you have flowers blooming left and right. And I love spring here in the District of Columbia. So anyway, my relatives, thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking time to sit down for my second cup of coffee. I hope you have a great day. Let me look through the comments really quick to see if anyone else is commenting here on what's going on. Doesn't look like it, but a few people saying Yat-A. George Yat-A, Beneth, or Yat-A, thanks for joining. Jermaine, thanks for joining. 1956 GABA, Yat-A, thanks for saying a greeting here this morning. It's great to have everyone around this morning or this afternoon. I hope you have a great day, my relatives. Walk in beauty, and maybe we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.